Hello, mic test. Hi everyone, this is Andy from Binance Labs. Binance Labs is the venture arm of Binance, and thanks everyone for coming here today. And yeah, let's start with the panel. So maybe first thing to ask is this is the last event of the KBW. What are the insights you guys have gathered, the takeaways from interacting with everyone for the past few days?
I think one of the major takeaways for me has been that I thought that Toronto traffic was bad. It turns out that Korea traffic is way worse.
Huh.
I've been told that Thailand is incredibly problematic as well, so we'll have that for DevCon. I think on a slightly more serious note, it feels like the Korean crypto scene is pretty alive and kicking. And even though there's a little bit of like doom and gloom in the West, it very much feels like the ecosystem is really coming together over here. I think the second takeaway would be that Bear is in control. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, I think the key point of KBW is to handpick good events like this. Yeah, and I basically did like several meetings, and most of the time I was just spending my time in office and working hard. We're just about to launch our public testnet soon, so yeah, we need to work hard. So yeah.
I think there's two takeaways that I think were super meaningful for me over the last couple of days. The first one is I learned Smokey's headset over there can be bought on Amazon. So looks like tonight I'll be shopping for a new headset. And I think the second one is there's something really powerful about the Korean crypto culture that last time I was here in Seoul I didn't really feel it the same way that I think I felt it today, or I think the last couple of days. So going to be really interesting to see. I've always been a huge advocate and thinking to myself that the next wave of the crypto run is going to come from the East. And I think the more I travel around Asia, the more I believe that. So I think that'd be my biggest takeaway.
Nice. Yeah, I wanted to start off first by asking, what do you guys see is the big problem in the industry today? Because I think it's a little bit broken. And how are you guys going to planning to solve it through whatever projects you guys are in?
Yeah, I think there's just been a real lack of bears. Anyway, so to be somewhat serious for a second, I think it's really easy to have the cop-out answer that'll give you to start, which is that there aren't that many applications that people want to use. I think that the funniest thing that I heard over the week was, are you building for the non-existent consumer, right? Which is to say that there's a lot of people building ivory towers and these highly technical castles in the sky that sound great in theory and maybe are interesting in concept one day, but end up being highly inaccessible and just intimidating and unusable for most people. So I think on one hand, I feel like we've lost the plot a little bit. And we've just sort of ended up focusing on things that are very nice in concept but are very impractical in application. And I think that we also don't have that many applications in crypto that have real product market fit or really have a chance of getting people to use them easily. I love DeFi. I'm a DeFi guy by nature, but I don't think that DeFi is necessarily going to be the killer app that takes everyone on chain easily in the early days. I think it could be a funnel down the road, but I think that right now, for example, if you're building solely in DeFi, you're hitting between 2,000 and 20,000, let's say, if we're optimistic, consumers. Whereas I think there's a large and interesting future when it comes to the applications that exist at the intersection of sort of one would consider a traditional Web 2 product with a degree of crypto under the hood, whether that be tokens for greater incentivization of certain behaviors, whether that be for faster settlement and payment, whether that be simply as a means of allowing you to do more, I'd say, greater degrees of composability on chain. And I think that's sort of what we need. So when I think about what Berachain specifically is doing to fix the current state of things, I break it down into a couple things. One is that the whole concept of proof of liquidity has effectively been built to allow the chain itself to drive value and to drive incentives and rewards to the applications building on top of it. Berachain really is the first ecosystem that rewards the people who simply use the chain and its applications. This allows these applications to reduce their customer acquisition costs, increase their capital efficiency, bootstrap their liquidity more easily, and really sort of I'd say cross that early chasm of death and that tricky valley when you're trying to really reach escape velocity and on one hand manage building an application and a product, on the other hand managing your own token liquidity and your ability to attract users towards it. And then the second thing is I think that we're focusing heavily within the ecosystem on supporting and building and working with builders who want to create products that we think have a chance of actually getting used one day. I think it's really fun to build weird DeFi stuff, and I have lots of fun nerd snipe conversations of that sort. But we're also very excited about the things that feel like they can really onboard like hundreds of thousands and millions of people in a non-corny, non-fake KYC user manner, which I think we've seen a lot of over the last couple of years, right? So for example, there's an application that we're really excited about called Over Under, and these guys are effectively building a computer vision powered esports betting platform. So it actually takes streamer data and allows you to effectively in real time calculate the odds of any given event happening in a game. Something like that really benefits from being on chain in terms of easy access to liquidity, in terms of instant settlement of those payments, but also allows you to really easily have that distributed to tens and hundreds of thousands of people through Twitch streams. So that's just one example. There's Puffpaw, which you and I have joked about a bunch, which I think is going to be lots of fun. I think that these things are uniquely also enabled by a culture that is meant to be, I think, like fun in the front but serious in the back. So sort of the opposite of the classic crypto mullet, right? We try to have an approachable, fun, somewhat ridiculous brand. I'm on the stage in a panda mask. We had a dude with a penguin behind him. Like, I think the industry benefits from this, to be honest. And I think that the combination of effectively a chain that's built to drive value to its applications and a chain that's built around a culture of fun competency can go a long way.
Yeah. So the main key takeaway here is that I want to make here is I believe that liquidity nowadays are pretty saturated. Like there's like so many different chains, but the liquidity is a very limited resource. And when you try to allocate this liquidity, you have like all these other options, but in the reality, most of the liquidity are being held in decentralized exchanges or being idle, which means there are more liquidity that we need to target. And the key takeaway that DeFi is more powerful is that we can create composability around these assets. And by having these composability, the rehypothecation is like a default feature for that centralized finance cannot even kind of mimic. So through Mitosis, what we're trying to create is we want this passive liquidity that is underlying in these like centralized exchanges or just like kept idle to be utilized into more on-chain. So we work with multiple chains basically. We're currently working with 8 different chains, and we deploy something called a vault. And through the vault, users can deposit assets into the vault. And essentially, what it does is the LP assets in the Mitosis chain, you can decide where to allocate this underlying liquidity. And we know that people not really kind of participate on the on-chain governance. So as a solution, we took is that we made people to delegate their voting power by providing liquidity into dApps on Mitosis. So in that way, we can efficiently make users to become a passive user, but in the same time, become the capital being more active and active. So we create this like the flywheel in Mitosis, and we try to prove that our bet is right. Yeah, so that's like what we're trying to solve in Mitosis.
I think when I came into the space 2.5 years ago, I talked to some of my business partners who ended up acquiring Pudgy with us, and we ultimately thought that the space had a branding and a marketing problem. And I felt like too many companies within the industry were waiting for consumers to come to them rather than coming to consumers. And a lot of what I want people to look at, specifically from a Pudgy Penguin perspective, is Pudgy is a Trojan horse to onboarding people on chain in a way that is not predicated around price going up or price going down. It's around acute culture, a universal IP that anyone can identify with that meets people, whether they're 60 years old or 4 years old or a man or a woman or any ethnic background in any part or any region within different parts of the world. And so I think we've done a really great job of that in cultivating a community that I think is, in that respect, unparalleled within the space, because I think it speaks to just so many different people. On the other side, we've recently announced that we started creating a company called Abstract, which is our chain, that's going to start powering all of our ecosystem products. And ultimately, what I started to find when I started, figuring out which chains, Pudgy wanted to actually build on top of, I felt like there was this huge gap in how people were focusing and prioritizing consumer adoption, and ultimately building the right consumer tools and the right consumer platforms to take somebody from a non-crypto curious or a crypto curious user to a crypto consumer almost seamlessly. And so we kind of decided that we wanted to tackle that problem as well, and then ultimately that's how Abstract became conceptualized. But I think when I want you guys to think about what we're doing, which ultimately is the Igloo, which holds both of these businesses, is we want to solve crypto's branding and marketing problem, and we want to meet consumers where they are, instead of waiting for them to come to us every time the price goes up and leaving us when the price goes down.
Right, I really love that. Yeah, since we're on the topic of next era of liquidity, I don't think we have liquidity in crypto. And like institution money is into ETFs, smart money is into seed rounds, dumb money is into meme, and there really isn't much liquid. Like, what are your thoughts about getting the next source of liquidity? Like, where does it come from? And will it ever come?
Are you asking who buys our bags next, bro? I think that's a yes. I think that the answer is a little bit closer to actually what Luca indicated, in that I think that right now we do have a pretty deep barbell in crypto, in that on one side we have these large miners, whale farms, like these groups that will be moving somewhere between 7 and 9 or 10 figures of capital on chain, but they're often very concentrated and very cabal-like. On the other hand, we have effectively click farms across a number of different regions, whether that be African countries, Southeast Asia, whatever it might be. They're just playing these tap-to-earn, airdrop farm type products. I do think that what actually is really required is applications that are easy to use for the consumer. And I think that, again, I think the idea of consumer crypto, or that phrase, is a bit of a meme, because at the end of the day, any product should be usable for the average consumer. I don't think it has to be like, this is a consumer product. I think it should simply be a product that people can fucking use, which is just crazy to me that this has emerged as a form of branding. I think a lot of that comes from, on one hand, simpler user experiences, and I think that we're seeing that with some of the account abstraction work we're doing. I think we're sort of starting to see that with just better on and off ramps. I think we're starting to see better mobile experiences, stuff like Coinbase smart wallets, etc., that allow you to just log in, use an app, use your credit card to pay, use your Apple ID to pay, etc. So I think a lot of those things will actually help make that next wave of people, more open to using crypto. So I think it's like that middle range, right? It's the people who are probably a lot like us on this panel, in that they're probably somewhere in their 20s to 30s. They're doom scrolling TikTok and Instagram a bunch of times. They're somewhat risk on. Perhaps they're gamers, gamblers, sports bettors, something of the sort, or just your average consumer who sees something interesting to engage in. And I think that a lot of what will actually need to happen for those folks to engage is kind of closer to what Luca was saying as well, right? There needs to be a little of a revamp on the branding side. People don't need to associate crypto with FTX. They need to associate crypto with, funky animals and the such. And I do think that there's something to be said about building applications that people actually want to use and that are only found on chain. So I think we think a lot about how we can, effectively identify applications that really do benefit from being in a crypto, enabled or an on-chain environment, and B, that actually have a chance of making it out of the hood, like a chance of really reaching some degree of meaningful usage or adoption, right? Think about something like CoStar, right? What if someone built like a CoStar type product on chain? We've even joked about that internally, right? But stuff that has a massive, I'd say, potential for virality, stuff that has massive potential for user-generated content, all these sorts of things are what I think will actually allow crypto to onboard its next set of bag buyers, or whatever we want to call them.
Yeah. So when you think about liquidity, like the liquidity that someone has, it's not treated equally, which means basically it's that if you are smart money, you get into the deals like VCs and these very opportunities where only a limited numbers of people can invest. But if you're retail, you basically can provide liquidity to open protocols, and you get returns in exchange of that. So what we view is that like there's a huge discrepancy between how like liquidity is being taken in the industry, and there has been always like a very private deal of providing liquidity into these like projects, and in exchange of that, you get these like very mercenary or predatory deals. You get like tokens that are non-vested, and you dump your tokens into the market, and things always happen. But as a retail investor, you never have these kind of exposure on like what really happens into the market. So essentially what we're trying to solve here is to create like a public pricing for liquidity where people can actually view what my pricing of the liquidity is and if I'm providing the liquidity in the right space. And what Mitosis is trying to solve is gives like an indicator of your liquidity is actually valuable or not. And from a private market of like negotiation part where like whales or institutional providing the liquidity, it can provide like a very good starting point where you can start the negotiation, not by having like these predatory deals. Yeah.
So I think the question is where do you think the next set of liquidity is going to come from, if I was not mistaken, Andy? And I actually think that's going to, I think it's going to come from Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and I think it's going to come because they want to have fun. And I think Smokey is probably one of the only other groups that I think looks at it in this lens. But if you actually remember, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, but actually a lot of my peers and the people that I work with within this space, you know, maybe we came in here because we wanted to make money, but I felt like I actually came in here because I was having fun, and it felt fun. And I feel like this is a misguided emotion that I think a lot of teams up until this point have totally haven't doubled down on. And so from our perspective, I think Gen Z and Gen Alpha is digitally native in a way that I think the other millennial and boomer generation isn't. They are making more money today than I think most people realize, and they want to spend that money, and they want to do it, and they want to have fun. And I think that's where the first set of 50 million users is probably going to come from. I think that's where consumers are going to break through in a way that I think crypto's never seen before. And I think the narrative is going to go from yielding and compounding money and, you know, all of these, you know, amazing technical achievements that we've probably achieved over the last couple of years. But the TAM there is probably a couple 100,000 people, and then it drops off a cliff. While fun is universal, it doesn't matter if you're in Asia or America, it doesn't matter your age range, everybody wants to have fun. Everybody has, at some point in their life or at some point during their day or their week or their month, has a bucket of money in which they spend around discretionary spending, and they spend that to occupy their free time. And I think crypto is one of the best places for that liquidity to go. So my answer would be Gen Z, Gen Alpha, to go and use crypto rails to have fun. And I think the companies that capture that fun are going to be the ones that win.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think like each one of you have your own strength, and I think Luca, you are more like, you have a very interesting strategy, like targeting the Web 2 and Instagram and YouTube and like girls, boys, young, old, and everything, and then bringing them into Web 3 more on the consumer and branding. And then Smokey is like really good at ecosystem building. And I think like L1, L2s, there are just hundreds of them. It's just impossible to fight. And yeah, I think you have like something really special, like the BD strength, like the, and then for Jake, like it's about DeFi, it's about liquidity, and yeah. So like, what is the like, could you elaborate more on the strength that you guys have?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, you know, going a little bit back to stuff that I touched on a little bit earlier, I think there's two things that we do a lot at Berachain. One, and something that I believe in very strongly, is that it is very difficult to buy, I think, someone actually caring. Like, I think it's incredibly difficult to make someone say, now I believe in this, or now this is something that I want to, regardless of financial outcomes, et cetera, dedicate time and attention towards. And I think that that's something that we think about a ton from like just a psychology perspective. How do we actually build an environment, and how do we build a culture, and how do we build a group of people with positive network effects that actually really believe in a concept or an idea? Because I think that if you do that, it's actually not entirely dissimilar from like how religions are formed, right? And then that can have all sorts of weird connotations, but what I mean is belief goes a long way. And I think that the way that we try to facilitate that within the Bearchain ecosystem is really trying to like uplift as many people who are building interesting, differentiated new things as possible, and setting a very high bar for performance. I think that we've seen a ton of ecosystems in the past really just plagued by this average low bar for quality of applications within an ecosystem. So, you know, a new chain will go live, and for 6 months you'll just have a stream of shitty DeFi forks and maybe an OpenSea fork and, you know, something else, maybe a name service if you're really lucky. And there's just very little of interest for anyone to really engage in or get excited by. And I also believe in the concept of like, you know, like attracts like, right? One of the oldest concepts in chemistry, the whole idea is that like, if you have a bunch of shitty builders, you're gonna get more shitty builders. If you have a bunch of really cracked builders who are building interesting products that have their own brands, their own beliefs, then you're gonna attract more of those, right? And I think the more zealots that you can build, the better. So for us, we think a lot about how we can work with the ecosystem teams, not just to you know, give them a fish, but to teach them how to fish and to figure out how can we help upskill them as founders, as leaders, as people building their own businesses. And then that sort of leads into the second point, which is to say, Bearchain at the end of the day, you know, we focus on the application layer above all else, right? I think the chain itself does not matter. The chain should not be the main character. You know, we are ideally there to help with distribution, help with growth, but really the power of Bearchain is that it is an accelerant for the application layer, because the chain itself, every time it's producing a block, is pushing those emissions and those incentives towards the applications, making it easier for them to onboard users. So really, I think that we try to create an ecosystem that builds itself and gives itself the opportunities to succeed, and we try to mechanistically enable that at the financial level from the chain as well. And I think that what that ends up with at the end of the day is not. It's ideally something that looks more like a social or a community validator set than anything else, in that you don't want Bearchain to be me or our team members. You want Bearchain to be the culmination of a number of strong nodes of different community members who each form their own groups, their own tribes, their own audiences, and the sum of those parts is what really causes a win condition, right? So when I think about our strengths, it's you know, turning liquidity into security with proof of liquidity, using that to help applications. It's setting a really high bar for performance in the ecosystem apps and differentiated ideas, and it's allowing these mini tribes to form that all sort of help each other along the way.
Yeah. So one of the key differentiator in the market that Mitosis has advantage of it is that our success is not like our KPI is not to make Mitosis chain into the greater form. It's more like we're more like augmenting factor for all these other chains, where you have these like vault contracts on many different chains, and we want to accomplish something that people provide liquidity on one chain through Mitosis, and then whatever the yields are generating in the highest place, the internal governance process will allocate that liquidity to somewhere else on behalf of users. So it's something like this. When there's like so many different chains right now, we believe that there's so many passive capitals, which means we want users to be active, but in the reality, like the liquidity is the only thing that really matters when you think about the KPI of the success of the chain. And when you try to make all these like active users in the on-chain ecosystem, I'm pretty sure that like the abstract will like, you know, make a like actual product that is working for the retail. But trying to be real when it comes to like liquidity going into the DeFi, we believe that entering the passive capital to enter into DeFi in a more seamless way is the main takeaway that Mitosis is trying to achieve. And by having the ecosystem on liquidity, we think that we work with all these like different chains, and we make this capital to be like moving over moving over these different chains and help these liquidity to gain more rewards for users. And yeah.
And I think from our perspective, I want to play an important role in a certain niche within this industry, and I think there's multiple niches that I think will be super impactful and significant in terms of where crypto goes and how it grows. I think for us, we want to be the guys that lead consumer. I think whether you look at what Pudgy Penguins has done and how it's broken through in a mass, I don't think there's any other case study that this industry has ever seen where you've seen a consumer brand break through the way that that has. On the other side of it, we have Abstract that I think is really positioned to add an extra layer to support people in a way to kind of build the same way that we've built at Pudgy. And so I think from our perspective, what makes us the team to do that? I think first and foremost, it starts and stops with our community. Ultimately, I think we have some of the best champions within crypto. If you understand Pudgy and you understand the Pudgy community, it is a group that is super passionate, is super aligned, and they do their best in terms of giving crypto and building crypto in a positive light. On the other side of that, our team has been building mass consumer products and brands for the last 7 or 8 years, and I think we're just best positioned to understand what it means to build a good consumer experience and a great consumer journey. And then the last one is probably our marketing expertise. I mean, this is where I pride, our team's talents the most. I think we just understand, viral marketing and viral distribution in a way that I think very few, if any, teams understand within the industry. And we want to bring that superpower, and we want to support builders and community members, and we want to leverage what we've been able to kind of figure out over the last 7 or 8 years, and bring that distribution and those rails to the rest of, crypto and, other parties involved as well. So I think that's kind of how we're looking at things.
Cool. Yeah, I think we are about almost over time now. So maybe what is the next big thing for you guys in 30 seconds for the second half of the year?
Yeah, I think for us there will be a long-awaited mainnet. So after a couple years of building and a whole lot of fun along the way, we're going to be graduating and launching our chain, launching our token, and hopefully having a lot of fun along the way with every funky app that one can think of, whether that's weird DeFi or incredibly weird consumer.
Yeah, for us, we'll be launching our public testnet pretty soon, and before that, we'll be launching our public testnet waitlist. So, as I mentioned earlier briefly, that once you attended IRL in this event, you'll be receiving an email for the waitlist code, and it's basically like a super pass code that gives you can bypass all the waiting lists. So yeah, we'll be launching mainnet hopefully by end of this year. Yes.
Yeah, last year Pudgy kind of broke the internet when we went to Walmart and Target, and I think we've got something that's bigger than that, if it can get any bigger. So I'm excited to share that when the time is right, and I'm excited to prove ourselves. I think nobody believed in us when we bought Pudgy 2 years ago, and we said we would be the #1 NFT project. 2 years later, here we are. Regardless of maybe a CryptoPunk is more expensive, I think we are the biggest and the baddest community and project in the space. And we're going to do the same thing with Abstract. I think a lot of people are fading, and we're gonna be the #1 L2 in the world, and I'm confident of that.
Nice. All right, I guess that's about it. Thank you everyone for the time, and yeah.
Woo.